Hi, I'm Jeff Girard, President of the Concrete Countertop Institute, and today I want to demonstrate caulking using silicone to caulk a form using 100% silicone caulk, and I'll be using some other materials that you can get at a home center, which include wax, any kind of wax, and I'll go over that in a minute, and some simple caulking tools that you can make. I've got a basic mold here, which is a mold for a small vanity. It's a basic melamine box with a fiberglass, off-the-shelf fiberglass sink mold. I'm going to be caulking the interior of the form and around the sink. Now the purpose of caulking and sealing your forms with silicone caulk is twofold. The first, which actually is the most important, is to waterproof the mold. Concrete has water in it, and the water wants to leak out of any kind of unsealed joint. So if you don't caulk your forms, what's going to happen is that concrete is placed in the forms, and as it starts to cure, the moisture is going to be lost through that joint. And the melamine can absorb the moisture and swell. That can actually cause a misshapen edge. But most likely what will happen is there'll be a change in the water-cement ratio and a drying effect around the perimeter. And it's often seen as this sort of a light band around the edges of the form, and that's because you're losing moisture through that joint. So it's really important to waterproof that joint. The second reason we caulk the forms is to create a nice radius or a nice rounded edge in the concrete. So we pre-shape the concrete by using the form instead of casting sharp edge and then having to grind or hand shape that or use a tool to shape that. Now that's actually quite efficient to do it that way, but it changes the look of the concrete. Now you may have read or seen or heard about people using blue tape to do this. Nobody does that. That's a whole lot of work. We're not going to do that. Get rid of that. Don't even think about doing that. We don't need it. In fact, with this technique, once you get a little bit of practice on it, you can do it with your eyes closed. It's that simple. So let me talk about the silicone. What I'm using is 100% silicone. It happens to be GE Silicone 2. It's a favored brand, favored style, but you don't have to use GE, but it has to be 100% silicone caulk. Don't use anything that says latex or acrylic. It's not going to work. Those will actually stick to the concrete. 100% silicone caulk, once it's cured, doesn't stick to concrete. It actually makes a very nice forming material. The reason I'm using black caulk in this case is my forms are white, and I want that high contrast. You could also use a dark brown or bronze, but just don't use white, don't use clear, because you won't be able to see what you're doing. It's really important that you see the effects of the caulking process. So color actually does matter. The other materials I'm using are, this happens to be a floor paste wax. This particular can is a Minwax. I got it at Home Depot. Any brand of paste wax will work. Don't use car wax because most car waxes have silicone in them, and silicone can get into the concrete and can compromise your sealer's bond if you are using a coating or anything like that. So use a wood finish, or in this case, this is what I'm going to be using for this demonstration. It's actually a wax made for marble. It's a stone wax. It's a harder type wax, and this actually happens to be black. For black marble, and it's going to help you see what I'm doing. It's purely for video purposes. The paste wax that I normally use is clear. It doesn't have any color. You don't need color. It doesn't matter. But for demonstration purposes, I happen to have black wax. I'm going to be using that because it's easier to see what I'm doing. The tools that I'm going to be using, this happens to be a handle from one of those wooden handled foam brushes. And the wooden handle that when the foam brush disintegrates or gets used up, normally you throw this out. Well, this becomes a great caulking tool. This happens to be a 1/2 inch diameter. It's just a wooden dowel, so you could buy a big wooden dowel and create your own tools. I have a 1/2 inch, and this is a little bit more than 3/8 of an inch. This is a 5/16 inch wood dowel, so different size wood dowels give you different size tools. And if you notice, all of these tools have 45-degree angle cut into them. And there's a reason for that, and it allows me to get into the corners of the forms with the tool. And you'll notice as I'm caulking how advantageous that is. So I can reach down into the very corner of the form and create a nice shape that extends all the way to the form. if I just use the blunt end of the dowel, I wouldn't be able to get into the corner because one side of the dowel would actually hit the form and prevent me from getting into the corner. Now, do you have to use wooden dowel? No, but they're cheap and you can get them pretty much anywhere. Some folks use popsicle sticks or tongue depressors. I happen to have one, and it works great. We use it the same way. And another tool that probably everybody has lying around is an old ballpoint pen that has dried up or died or been used up. Well, the smooth plastic body of it becomes a nice tool. You just cut a 45-degree angle into it and sand it smooth. It's really important that this edge that actually does the shaping doesn't have any burrs or sharp edges or anything like that. I've used hot glue sticks for a particular size. You just cut it with a knife. Again, you want a nice smooth shape, but pretty much any tool that will give you that radius as a way of scraping the caulk will work. You can see the 45-degree angle and the smooth shape. Now what I do is once I've cut this on a chop saw or whatever, I'll sand it, and then you can either coat it with an acrylic sealer or I just wax it. I just use the same wood paste wax to give it a nice wax coat. So the first step we're going to do is we need to wax the interior of the form where the silicone is going to go. If you simply caulked the form as it is, the silicone would stick to the melamine and you would have a really hard time cleaning up any excess. The whole point of this exercise is to use as little effort as possible to create a very nice bead of caulk, or it's called a fillet, a nice little fillet of caulk where you want it. And all the excess peels away easily. So the first step to doing that is to prevent the silicone from bonding to and sticking to the melamine. And that's where the wax comes in. So it's merely just rubbing on a fairly thin layer of wax, and hopefully you can see that. You don't want it to be too heavy. Like that's way too much. It's just a thin layer, and you don't have to do everything either. So simply just a matter of waxing. I'll wipe this excess up to get the melamine coated with a thin layer of wax so the silicone won't stick to the melamine. Now I like to extend the wax out about 2 or 3 fingers wide. It gives me a little bit of buffer in case some of the silicone drips or a little string of silicone drips onto the melamine. I can peel it off. It makes cleanup easier. Some people, if it's formed small enough, you just go ahead and wax the whole thing. But on a large form, that becomes a little bit impractical. It just wastes time. Again, you don't want to use too much wax, and it's not like you're buffing. You can caulk immediately. If some of you are wondering where I got this black wax, any granite supply shop. I'll rattle off 3. There's Grand Quartz, Granite City Tool, and Braxton Bragg. Those are 3 big ones. They'll have some sort of granite wax or marble wax, probably tinted. There are some woodworking waxes that are tinted as well. They're of course tinted for wood, not for stone. I prefer to use just a non-colored wax. So you can see that this goes pretty fast, and if I wasn't talking, I'd be done in half the time and already be caulking. It's very important that you're thorough. It's just a thin layer of wax. Because it's black, I'm actually going back and trying to take off any excess. When it's clear, you tend to put a little bit more on than you actually need or want. Once you're done caulking and we're all done with the form, you can either leave the wax on the form and cast over it, or you can clean it off. If you cast over the wax will transfer to the surface of the concrete, and you can see the presence of the wax if you put water on the concrete. You'll see it beat up where the wax was. If you clean it off, you can clean it off with acetone, with paint thinner, or with alcohol to get the wax up before you cast your concrete. All right, so we're done waxing, and some of you may be thinking, well, you've got wax in the corners of the forms, and that's where your silicone's going to go. Isn't that going to be a problem? Well, it could be, but usually isn't. So what I'm getting at is you're going to want to have silicone right in that base corner here, and that silicone is going to be tooled to create that nice rounded fillet that the tool will make, because the tool will basically be pushed into the corner and then dragged. So what's left behind will be a nice smooth curve. There's going to be wax under the silicone, so that silicone will peel off very easily. So you have to be careful with that. Now it's advantageous to have wax on your mold, because if you didn't and you got silicone on your fiberglass mold, it's going to make cleanup of getting that silicone off the fiberglass mold really, really difficult. So the wax makes cleanup very easy. Now, if you want to make sure that the fillet of silicone stays in the form, so it's more resistant to peeling out, you're going to have to clean the wax out of that corner before you put the silicone in. And the simplest way to do that is to take a household cotton swab, a Q-tip, if you will, and I'm using paint thinner. You could use alcohol or acetone, and simply clean it out. And hopefully you can see that the Q-tip cleans out a path right in the corner. And it goes pretty fast. I don't normally do this. I used to do it all the time, but I found that it's not necessary in most instances. But it's a way of ensuring that the silicone's going to stick or bond to the melamine where you've cleaned the wax off, and everywhere else it's going to peel off nicely. So now it's time to start caulking. And so again, I'm using 100% silicone, and I've just fitted this in an ordinary caulk gun. And I've cut the tip at more or less a 45-degree angle. It's not critical because you're not shaping the caulk with this tip. So it doesn't, you can do this pushing the caulk or pulling it or whatever. Let me talk a little bit about how silicone works. It doesn't dry. You know, that's a misnomer. Misperception of a lot of latex-based caulks have to dry in order for them to get hard. Silicone requires moisture to cure, just like concrete needs moisture to cure. So if you're in an area that's really dry, say like Arizona or Colorado, where it's really, really dry and you don't have enough humidity, it's going to take your caulk a long time to cure. If you're in a very humid environment, I'm in North Carolina, it's pretty humid right now, the silicone's going to start curing really fast, meaning the surface is going to skin over fairly quickly. Not instantly, but you know, I don't want to spend 5-10 minutes between applying this and tooling it, because if it skins over, that skin will tear and then the resulting finish won't look good. So I need to work fairly quickly. I need to keep essentially a wet edge. So I'll caulk maybe 3-4 feet at a time and then tool it as I go, instead of trying to caulk the whole thing and then come back and tooling. That's sometimes a recipe for problems. The trick here is to get enough caulk in the corners to do what I want it to do. So it's better to use a little bit too much than to use too little. And the rule of thumb is about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit more in size. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if I start or stop or do that. It's all going to be good. See how I'm pushing it here and I was pulling it before? This is why, see how the caulk sort of drag, the little string of it leaked onto the form. That's why I wax the forms. Sometimes it's so hard you can't get to the corner, so you have to drop the silicone into the corner. Believe it or not, this works too. All I need to do is make sure there's enough caulk in that corner, and if I don't think I have enough, I can always come back and add more. So I'm going to be using this, it's actually a 7/16 inch dowel. That's just happens to be what this foam brush handle was. So the radius it's going to create is half that. So it's about 3/16. It's actually, what, 7/32 if you're counting. So the trick is you want to push this all the way against the form nice and firmly, and as you drag it in a smooth motion, you're pushing out excess caulk and leaving a nice fillet behind. I like to do the corners first and work upwards. Some people work out. But I like to start in the corner and work my way out and then go from there. So I'll start in this corner, push hard, pull in a smooth motion, and you'll see I have excess caulk on there. So I take a scrap piece of melamine and just clean my tool off. You can also have a paper towel to wipe off the excess so your tool is always clean. Now, you can see those two white lines. That's why I use black caulk. That's what I'm looking for. Essentially, the tool squeezes out the caulk so thin it's transparent. And the ridges of caulk on either side of what I want to keep, I let it cure. And that's the other benefit of this is once that cures, those just peel off. There's no trying to scrape it off or clean it off or anything like that. The next step, I'm not going to push this all the way to the corner because the tip of this will actually interfere and cut into the silicone that I've already placed. So I'm going to step it back a little bit, kind of work within that white line and just pull in one smooth motion all the way across. Now you can't see what I'm doing, but you'll see when I come back. I'm holding this tool at a constant angle, and I try to keep that flat face that I've cut. That trails the path, and it's more or less square to the face. I can't go all the way to the corner, so I'm just going to stop and pull it out. You can see I have excess, just clean that off. You can see here I have a lot of excess caulk here, so I didn't need to put as much down as I wanted to, but it's better to have a little bit too much than too little, because if I starve the joint and I don't have any squeeze out, or if I just have a thin string, as I go to peel it off, it's going to tear, and it's just going to take a long time. This will peel off in one strip, and you'll see that when this is cured. So now that I've got this path done, I'm going to come back from this corner and work backwards. So again, just take this all the way to the corner and pull in, and then flick it in one smooth motion. The less you play with the caulk, the less you try to go back and fix it, the better it's going to look. So there's always going to be a little bit of a transition mark, and you can choose where that transition mark is. Maybe you want to have that transition mark centered exactly, or maybe you don't care. But it's the hallmark of making concrete. So again, I'm going to caulk, put my tool down in the corner, caulk that joint, and if I wanted to touch up a spot, like if I wanted to come back here and touch this up, it's still good. I can do that. Come back in, flick, maybe clean that excess off so I don't mess things up. And you can touch it up within a reasonable amount of time. But don't go away and come back a few minutes later and expect you can do this. See how I'm holding the tool with the flat face out or into the form away from the caulk? You don't use it this way. That's not how you do it. You do it this way. And I want to have this flat edge more or less square to the path. So push this all the way in and come up. And you can see the lines, the white lines that are left. That's really important. And then I'll just work my way back into the corner. Careful not to go too far in. And now, I didn't get caulk all the way in that corner. So I have a little extra here. I can come back in and reshape that corner. I'm just going to go ahead and finish this out before it skins over. Come back in, flick it, and then work my way out of the corner. Corners are important because that's what you see. And they're never going to be absolutely perfect. There's always going to be a little bit of a ridge or a dimple or a protrusion, and that can be sanded off or honed out very easily. It's always important to push hard so you can see that white form, the white melamine. Start in the very corner, push hard, pull up, clean the tool, work my way back, flick out, and you can see how the white line extends down and then into the form. There's sort of a white diagonal line. That means I've scraped away too much silicone. I'm going to take some of my excess, come back into this corner, fill it in. Whenever you do this, you want to move in smooth motions. If you're really jerky, you're going to see that in the silicone. So that's it. This is left to cure overnight, and then the next day you peel it off. It's also very important to make sure this is fully cured, because a lot of times if you try to rush it too fast, the outside will be skinned over, but the inside will still be gummy, and when you go to peel it off, you're actually leaving silicone behind. Not the end of the world, it just means it's going to be harder to clean up that excess. You're going to have to wait longer anyway. Another trick that you can do is actually spray water on this. So we can spray water on this immediately, give it the moisture it needs to help it cure, and it doesn't make it cure any faster, but it gives it the moisture it needs in case it's really dry. Now the last step of caulking this form is to caulk around the sink mold. For this, I'm going to choose to use a slightly larger tool, so I have a bigger radius around the sink. You could use the same, you could use smaller, you could use larger. For this, I'm going to use something larger. That means I'm going to need to put more caulk down because I need to leave more behind. And the nice thing about this technique is if you make a mistake or you make a mess, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't have to be perfect right out of the gun. All I want to do is make sure I have enough silicone there, and that should do it. So with this, I'm going around the outside, and it's a little harder to keep the tool consistent going around the edges, so it's around the corners of the mold, so that's where a little bit of practice help comes in handy. You want to be smooth around those corners so you don't change the radius, because if I change this tool angle, I'm actually going to change the radius of the caulk, and that may or may not be a big deal to you. I'm going to start anywhere. I'll just start on this side. Push hard, smooth, keep going, flow it around, come back, and flick. Now you'll notice how some of the silicone has flopped down. And if it doesn't touch, it's okay. You can leave it. And that's the case of here, but I'm going to take care of that so it doesn't flop down and stick to the part I want for it to stay. So I'm going to quickly come in and retool that. This is the downside of using a little bit too much silicone, is you tend to get this kind of thing happening. I have to do it again. So all this excess silicone will just peel off very effortlessly. Anywhere, as long as it's on wax, it's going to clean up very nicely. Well, welcome back. It's the next day. I've allowed the caulk to cure overnight, and it's fully set. And so now the last steps to preparing this mold for casting is simply to peel off the caulk and then perhaps clean things up. I'm going to go through the different things, talk about the different things we can do. So peeling the caulk off is simply just start anywhere and roll up an edge and pull. And you can see how easily this and how fast this works. You can see how cleanly that caulk has pulled away, and any spillage or squeeze out just rolls off. This form has had plenty of wax on it, so this caulk should release. It's going to stick a little bit, but it simply pulls away. And the advantage of using a little bit more excess caulk is it has some pulling resistance, so it's easy just to peel it away. So now that the caulk is all removed and essentially we're ready to pour, there are a couple more things that I want to do. The first thing that I always do is make sure I wipe down all the silicone with a little bit of water. 100% silicone caulk needs moisture to cure. One of the byproducts of the reaction is acetic acid. So if you've ever noticed that silicone caulk kind of smells like vinegar, that's what that is. That's acetic acid. And there's a little bit of residue of acetic acid on the caulk, even after it's cured. So if you pour concrete over that caulk, then that acetic acid is going to affect the concrete just where that caulk is. And you can tell that happens by if you pour concrete over your caulk, and when you you pull the casting out and you wet the concrete, that area that's been caulked with silicone is a little bit lighter. So what we're going to do is simply take some water, you don't have to use a spray bottle, and wipe it down. So you could simply take a wet rag or a wet cloth and wipe down your forms. Okay, and what that's going to do is it's going to clean off the acetic acid residue. It's a good idea to wet down the forms anyway, because you want to make sure that silicone is fully cured. If you try to cast concrete onto silicone that's not fully cured, then you're going to have the same issues. So it's really important that silicone is fully cured. I would definitely recommend giving it at least overnight. Generally, that's all that's necessary. So it's a quick, easy way to make sure your forms are clean anyway. It's part of the process. Now, you could go ahead and wipe down with water and say, you know what, we're done. We're going to cast over the wax. We're going to cast right in the forms, and that's fine. That's what most people do. Every so often, you may want to make sure your forms are pristine and as clean as possible, and that means you're going to have to get the wax off the forms. And to do that, I'm going to use some paint thinner, which is just mineral spirits. You could also use alcohol or anything that cuts wax. And that's simply a matter of wiping down the forms to clean off the wax. I'm going to do that in a small area just to show you how easy that is. It's not something I normally do. All I do is wipe down the caulk with water, and that's it. So what I've got is some paint thinner and some paper towels. A little paint thinner on the paper towel, and just wipe up the form. So you can see how I'm cleaning the wax residue off the form. This fiberglass mold has to have the wax on it. That's part of the release agent that fiberglass needs. So I need to be careful not to wipe the wax off the fiberglass, otherwise I won't be getting the fiberglass mold out of the concrete. So if you're choosing to remove all the wax, go ahead and take care of all the surfaces. Make sure you keep using clean paper towels. If you're not going to clean the wax off, remember to wipe down with a damp towel, maybe a little bit of water, just a light wipe down, maybe do it once or twice, make sure there's no acetic acid residue left on that caulk, and you're ready to pour. Thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Girard, President of the Concrete Countertop Institute, and happy concreting.